how do you see, in terms of from the innovation perspective, coming up with a good business plan, not just selling the product, but selling a product that is sustainable?
I think one of the first things to appreciate is that the focus for capital providers vary, right? So when you say venture capital, there's venture capital for manufacturing businesses, there's venture capital for a whole host of businesses. For us, our focus is technology, technology and technology-enabled businesses. And really it's for a very straightforward reason, and that is we're looking for businesses that can grow very quickly in Nigeria, in Africa, and that can grow and scale to the world. Now, the easiest way that you do that, particularly given the challenges that we have in our own environment, is to invest in companies that leverage technology. So technology that helps them find their customer, technology that is important in the service that they provide. So that is how we look at venture capital.
Okay, but what are you actually seeing on the ground?
Well, in that regard, we think the opportunity is great. We see upwards of, not to exaggerate, probably 100 companies probably every month.
Every month?
Every month. Now, we invest across the continent, so we see quite a few companies. But for every single company we see, we're, again, evaluating against the benchmarks that we've set for ourselves. But whether there's the desire, the need, and the opportunity to put money to work in venture capital in Nigeria and in Africa, absolutely.
Would you say that, when you look at those companies, several of them across the continent, would you say that there's some regions, some countries that are leading in terms of perhaps the level of innovation or just the quality of ideas that are coming out?
I think what you see is contexts are evolving at their own pace, at very different paces, largely driven by historical antecedents. So you see so for example, in Nigeria, recently you've seen quite a few fintech companies being invested in, whereas in other parts of the continent, in other parts of Africa, for example, in Kenya, you've seen a lot of those investments being made before now. Now you're seeing many investments being made in companies that are building on top of some of those foundations that have already been laid. So it's not a competition per se. It's really just about what are the companies solving real problems and that customers are willing to pay for.
When you're talking about solving real problems, is it across the board? Because I think I had a guest here, I think it was last week, and he's creating or leading a major disruption in the medical space, using his platform, mobile technology, basically. Right. And I'm saying, that one could take that from a social point of view, impacting, the less privileged as well, those who are having challenges, especially at the primary healthcare level. But it's making a big impact there, and we're seeing that across, African solutions, by Africans themselves. Do you think that for an investor, would he be biased towards those? That kind of idea, as it were, because of the far-reaching impact that particular solution is having?
Well, again, it depends on the metrics that the investor has set himself. So you have some investors who are very much impact. I only invest in pure impact companies. There, I'm not necessarily focused on a profitable business, perhaps. But for us, we think the most sustainable way to build a company in the long term is to invest in profit-making companies. That being said, that a company is in it to make a profit does not mean that it doesn't have an impact. So again, you look at the companies that are being invested in recently, they're growing very quickly, many are approaching profitability, and you're seeing the impact that they're having because, so for example, again, with fintech, you're seeing that people are now able to invest. I said invest. People are actually able to make payments online. People are looking to invest and figure out how to invest in agriculture. All of those things have wide-ranging impact without necessarily being just impact.
Okay. So, looking at how we're making progress here on the African continent, how attractive some of these businesses are, comparing them to, on a global scale now, what we see in other regions like Asia, the US, Europe, what would be your assessment in terms of perhaps the innovation, how fast they're able to scale, and how far-reaching those solutions are?
One of the things that, and we've seen this on social media, it's not, I didn't coin this, where the commentator essentially said, look, the first phase, you have the Me Too's, people copying business models from other markets and trying to make them work here. We've seen varying success of some of those models, but I think what you will see is, and we are seeing, are models which are developed and aimed and really focused on solving local solutions, which you will not necessarily find in the US, which you will not necessarily find in Singapore, in Malaysia. Those business models, those businesses for us are the most exciting, because there the founder has a very, we say, a high definition understanding of what the problem is and what the solution is. And because it is built for here, it is a problem that can scale and scales very quickly. And we're seeing that in some of the companies we're investing in. So again, I'm always quick to say it's not a competition about who's growing the quickest or who's raising the most. It's really about who's solving a problem that customers are willing to pay for and that is suited to the condition that it is aimed
While
at.
also being able to make a profit, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So now, I know that, the SMEs out there listening, and I knew that, I was going to ask you how they should position themselves, but I think that answers the question. But for the obstacles, what are those obstacles perhaps you've seen across the board in the last couple of years that, no matter how great the idea is, how far-reaching the solution is, but, those companies still run into those problems and are still having issues surmounting them?
The nature of our world today is that business in Africa, business in Nigeria is hard. Let's not remove that. And business being hard means that companies starting face challenges that perhaps are not faced elsewhere. There's a lack of infrastructure. There's unorganized regulation. There's so many different factors. I think the more important thing for many of these companies is, again, understanding the context that you're in. You're solving a problem, and you
within a problematic environment, as it were.
And therein is the opportunity, because if some of these problems were not there, the opportunity to invest and to build a business will also not exist. So again, in great challenge lies opportunity.
Okay, now finally, what is your outlook for this year in terms of the flow, the inflow that we could see, and if you think that it would be higher than what we saw in 2018?
We're very excited about the outlook for venture capital in Nigeria and in Africa, because I think increasingly investors locally and also internationally are getting a better understanding what it takes to invest in a Nigerian company and an African company. So whereas before perhaps investors were relying on relationships, maybe with the founder from the past or whatever, experience is now demonstrating what is required to build a scalable business. And people are seeing and really understanding beyond the, Nigeria is almost 200 million people in population. Beyond those headline numbers, people are actually seeing and understanding what the opportunities are to build big businesses.
Tosin,